this panel will be looking at how optimism is perceived by the youth today. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the world and pessimism about the future, but we know that there's another side of that, which is, what are the good things about the world today? I want to start this panel by asking our panelists briefly, what is something you're optimistic or excited about for the future?
Thank you to the whole Human Energy team for making this possible. Also, special thank you to Sheila for allowing me to join this group as the latest member of the advisory board. I think that something I'm excited about for the future is just the prospect of growth and development, especially on the theme of the Global South. I think something I was noticing yesterday walking through this campus was just how grand it is and everything's new, and it's just really exciting to see the Global South developing and all the hope and positive economic outcomes that are going to result of that. It's really exciting. And then also future technologies that we can't even imagine are going to be such impactful part of our lives. Those are things that really excite me looking forward.
I'm excited for, this conference is about multidisciplinary and bringing together various disciplines in one place and to discuss the future and benefit of our humanity. And I know that as we're at the advent of AI, we'll be able to become the most cross-disciplinary we've ever been on even an individual basis. Something that this idea was sparked by something Natasha said on the first day, that in order to become an expert, you have to spend 10,000 hours devoted to it. But I think that no longer holds in the current, even in the current day, and it will become more and more. You'll be able to be an expert in something much faster, and you won't even need to become an expert anymore in order to innovate and ignite change. And now imagine that when you collaborate with many others who are able to do the same thing. I think a lot of our problems are going to be solved due to this cross-disciplinarity.
Cool. One thing I think I'm optimistic about for the future, I guess the younger generation, is even though we just finished the previous section in the panel regarding the sort of negative effects of social media and sort of what we need to do to make those things a more positive contribution to us as youth. I am very optimistic about the ceiling per se of social media and the sort of future it can give us as a sort of way to connect with a bunch of people around the globe. And I think this conference kind of signifies that sort of being what social media could lead to, which is the unification of the Global South and North.
Going into the future, I would say something that I'm excited for is just with technology and just also how it seems like everyone's kind of basis of knowledge has increased. Being able to kind of have more of a personalization aspect to not only our education, but kind of our own personal interests going into the future. I think that sounds really interesting and exciting to me. Kind of incorporating the usage of AI and technology into just our everyday lives. For practical reasons, but also just to explore new worlds, whether that be real worlds through augmented reality or something like that, or just worlds that are kind of created and reimagined by humans.
Thank you for those wonderful comments. This is clearly a very optimistic group, but as we know, there's a lot of pessimism with younger generations today. And I want to open up this discussion to talk about, why do you think younger generations are becoming increasingly less optimistic about the future? What do you think are the primary reasons for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's odd. It feels kind of much more natural to talk about what's pessimistic, and it's kind of harder to think in concrete terms about what you're excited for. And I think that's largely in part to when I think about our generation and starting out being really young, really intense concepts like climate change and terrorism were discussed in our elementary school classes. And at least specific to the US, practicing active shooter drills, disrupting your learning the timetables. It's really intense for young minds. And I think that that's kind of shaped a lot of the pessimism and negativity, especially when I think about it in terms of something I'm really interested in, economics, is loss aversion, and I've done research on it, and a close partner, negativity bias, which is basically just that as humans, our minds psychologically, we weigh what we're missing and negative events way more heavily than equally positive events. And so that kind of magnifies the effect of the mass information that we receive, because we are focused way more heavily on the negative, and that kind of skews our perspectives in a poor way. And then obviously, that's just kind of younger life, elementary school, those intense concepts are introduced, and then social media, it's amplified. And I think that coming from a place of negativity is really significant in our generation's perspective about the future, and leads to a lot of despair and hopelessness, because everyone is kind of just coming from a place of fear because of this imbalance in the way that we process information.
Yeah, I agree. I think the historical context of our upbringing definitely plays a role. I also think, building off what Johan said just in the presentation before us, that our generation is experiencing a sense of victimhood despite being born in a very prosperous time. I'm not certain why, but I do notice that in our generation, that we do feel like, why was this placed upon us? Maybe the fact that we've experienced all of these historical things may have some kind of role in it. But despite us being born in a very the most technologically advanced time, and having the least drug problems, the least all of these things, at least in America, it still seems that our generation is plagued with this sense of, why me? Why do I have to deal with all these hardships? And I think part of it is because when we were young, we had bliss and innocence, and now we're adults and we have to deal with the gravity of the world. And so that's why we have this sense of, why me? And the second element is this sense of guilt, because we do live in a time of prosperity. So this sense of victimhood with a crossover of guilt, of having such, I hate to use the politicized word, privilege. We have such privilege, it leads to this negativity of, what am I doing here, and why do I have such a good life when I have no idea what's going to be in the future, and the world has so many problems and I have no idea what my role will be in it moving forward.
I think part of the pessimism has to do, referencing Johan's talk once again, I think polarization and sort of being at odds with one another is very normalized in the younger generation. And I think, although I spoke of the ceiling of social media, obviously the detriments are very clear. And I think those sorts of perpetuating ideals and conflicts, social media kind of contributes to that. And I think that's sort of rooted in, referencing another talk, the roundtable discussion regarding the difference between anguish and anxiety. I think the younger generation has a sort of pervasive and permeating anxiety of emptiness, if you will. They feel the need to want to, again, they're very attached to comfortability instead of sort of the unknown of getting to know more people and getting outside of your comfort zone. So that sort of emptiness within them is being filled by these self-circulating negative ideals that social media sort of puts out, because it does provide a level of sort of comfortability to them, and it provides a level of relatability that they can be a part of a group. But I think what we need to work towards is, again, this sort of anguish, if you will, and being okay with not knowing how other people are necessarily going to react to you, not knowing what other people in that interaction is going to look like, but always being open to it.
I would definitely echo what my peers have already said. Definitely highlighting the sense of overwhelm and just like pointlessness kind of that a lot of youth face these days. Of course, a lot of the issues that we do face, like on a global scale, are things that, you know, humanity has been experiencing for a very long time. But with the world at our fingertips, it kind of allows all of these things to feel like it's happening like in our own minds, and it can get very overwhelming. And I feel like the youth of our day, we lack kind of like that ability to self-regulate and just kind of emotionally regulate. And it really, that's why like I'm so interested in just kind of like self-world relations, you know, understanding and experiencing yourself in relation to the world. Because I think also in our day, like youth also are kind of developing more of an intimate relationship to themselves through social media even, I would say. And so it's just really interesting kind of seeing, like, I think youth are really kind of struggling to just situate themselves within the context of like our historical and social and cultural moment. It feels like, you know, that we're just running, you know, whether that be away from our problems or, you know, towards some kind of solution. But, you know, it's really overwhelming hearing about like things that are going on in the world, and just, you know, like the classic climate change and everything like that, wars, everything like that. It's really overwhelming hearing about these things and just seeing kind of patterns repeat and continue, and cycles just kind of continuing going on, and then hearing about these things in our classes, going on our phones, seeing it, just kind of seeing it everywhere. And it just feels like we're constantly on this treadmill of some kind.
These are some really wonderful insights. I think that there's a lot of truth to almost everything that was said now. I want to bring this conversation kind of around 360 and talk about maybe what we can do as a society to bring the youth to a more optimistic outlook for the future and kind of combat this pessimistic culture. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, the Noosphere, of course. I think that spreading ideas like global consciousness and interconnectivity is really important, because kind of like Beata was saying, we come from a point of like not knowing like, what do I do? We're focusing on everything that's wrong, but don't know how to fix it. We don't know like the sources of everything that's wrong. But I think that spreading an understanding of this global sphere that everyone's a part of, everyone can contribute to, can be really powerful in like motivating people our age to understand their role and kind of overcome this like place of despair and anxiety and anguish. And actually one thing in Clement's talk about having different levels of regulation for each sphere kind of got me thinking about a class that Sadie and I took our freshman year at USC. And it was about utopias, and we studied utopias of all these different philosophers. And I remember one point really stood out to me, which my ancient philosopher references are not as dialed in as everyone else in this room, but I remember the concept, and it was that if you stop looking at what's wrong with your society, then you don't know how to move forward, and you'll never achieve that utopia. So I think an essential shift in the perspective of our generation would be, just because we see everything that's wrong, that doesn't mean there's no hope. It just means we need to recognize our role in a society that's moving forward to a point that may never fully come to fruition, but our role is to push it there. And acknowledging all these issues is like a really important component of that.
And I think we're running short on time here, so if anyone else has any closing remarks, maybe?
I guess one thing I'll say is I feel like one thing that's really important to the youth of today is kind of our awareness of the importance of community. And so I think we're seeing a huge resurgence of youth like reimagining community and kind of ways to connect with other people. And I feel like this is a positive trend, using technology even and social media as a way to bring people together and bring, you know, different ideas to different populations that would have been harder to reach otherwise. And so, like, I think reimagining community is something that is really important for our generation, and I think it's something that's going to be continued to be explored as well.
Yeah, to build off of what Sam's saying, I think this time period where we're struggling with a lot of things as a global society is a point of rockiness where we're continuing to evolve and strive for betterment towards an optimal society where, you know, we can solve big human problems. I wanted to say, building off of what Sam said, that given this rockiness, what I think we may, if we go the right way, the good outcome way, is forming communities like what the War of Warcraft talk was defining, where we're not turning to communities for what we were given and what we can take and deal with and tolerate in order to have our needs met, but rather this source of support that is true and genuine and full. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. These were some really great insights.